WCW's biggest mistakes, legends, they let slip away. In the 1990s, WCW was the hottest wrestling company on earth. They had the TV deals, they had the money, they had Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair, Sting, and the NWO. For a few years, they even crushed WWE in the ratings war. But behind the bright lights and booming pyrotechnics, there was a darker story. WCW had some of the greatest talent in wrestling history under contract. Legends who would go on to redefine the business. But WCW didn't see it. They didn't push them. Some, they outright cut loose. And in doing so, they handed Vince McMahon the very weapons that would eventually destroy WCW itself. This is the story of the superstars WCW let slip away, and how those decisions changed wrestling forever. The Undertaker, from never a dime to immortal. In 1990, WCW had a 6'10" powerhouse named Mark Calloway. Tall, intimidating, surprisingly agile, with a quiet charisma. He was placed in a tag team called the Skyscrapers. Later, in forgettable singles matches, WCW management didn't know what to do with him. Behind the scenes, commentator Jim Ross saw the future. He went to management, telling them, this guy could be a star. But WCW higher-ups dismissed him. One executive reportedly told him flat out, "Kid, you'll never draw a dime in this business." Months later, Vince McMahon saw the exact same man and envisioned something entirely different. At Survivor Series 1990, Mean Mark Callis was gone. The Undertaker was born. For 30 years, The Undertaker became one of the most iconic characters in wrestling history. The streak, the mystique, the dead man. All of it could have happened in WCW, but they let him walk away. Stone Cold Steve Austin, fired by fax. Before the beer, before the middle fingers, before Austin, 316. There was stunning Steve Austin. Blonde hair, clean look, crisp wrestling style. He had the fundamentals down. He held the United States Championship. He was part of Paul E. Dangerously's Dangerous Alliance. Austin was reliable, but WCW never saw him as more than a mid-carder. Why? Because the top of the card was already locked by Hogan, Flair, Sting, and the same circle of stars. Then came 1995. Austin suffered a triceps injury. While recovering, he got a phone call from Eric Bischoff, not to check on him, but to fire him. WCW told him he wasn't marketable. Broke and bitter, Austin went to ECW. Paul Heyman gave him a mic and no script. Out poured the venom, the rage, the edge. That's where Stone Cold was born. By 1996, he was in WWE. A year later, the Austin 316 promo lit the wrestling world on fire. The same man WCW fired would go on to lead WWE's Attitude Era, become the biggest draw in wrestling history, and play a key role in WCW's destruction. All because WCW didn't see it. Triple H terrorizing to the game. Today, Triple H is not only a 14-time world champion, he's also the man shaping WWE's future. But in 1994, he was just another WCW rookie. His first gimmick? Terrorizing. Yes, that was the actual name. Soon after, they gave him a new role, Jean-Paul Levesque, a snobbish French aristocrat with a laughably fake accent. The talent was obvious. He was professional. He had the physique. He had the skill. But WCW saw him as filler, another guy to lose to the stars. Triple H knew he'd never rise in WCW, so in 1995, he jumped to WWE. The fake accent was gone, and over the next decade, he became The Game, the leader of D-Generation X, one of the defining superstars of his generation. WCW never gave him a real chance. WWE gave him the keys to the kingdom. Mick Foley, the man who wouldn't stay down. In WCW, Mick Foley was Cactus Jack. a wild brawler known for brutal matches with steel chairs, concrete, and sheer chaos. But if you looked closer, Foley wasn't just doing violence for shock. He was telling stories. He was building emotion. His feud with Vader was legendary, brutal, so dangerous it left Foley missing part of his ear. But WCW didn't see a main eventer. Eric Bischoff didn't think Foley looked like a star, so Foley left. He went to ECW, then WWE. He became Mankind. He became Dude Love. He became Cactus Jack again. And eventually, he became a world champion. His shocking title win in 1999 drew ratings that shifted the tide of the Monday Night Wars. Mick Foley is now a Hall of Famer, beloved by fans worldwide. But WCW never looked past the missing teeth and the scars. Chris Jericho, too small for WCW, a legend in WWE. Chris Jericho came to WCW during the cruiserweight boom of the mid-90s. His matches with Rey Mysterio, Dean Malenko, and Juventud Guerrera were electric. Every week, he stole the show. But Jericho wasn't just a great wrestler. He was witty, creative, hilarious. His charisma was unmatched, and WCW never let him show it. Eric Bischoff thought he was too small to ever be a main event star. By 1999, Jericho had enough. He went to WWE, and on his very first night, he interrupted The Rock with one of the most famous debuts of all time. 2 years later, Jericho defeated both The Rock and Stone Cold in the same night to become the first undisputed WWE champion. The man WCW ignored went on to reinvent himself over and over, from Y2J to the Painmaker to the Ocho. Today, he's one of the most influential wrestlers in the world. WCW never gave him the mic. WWE gave him history. 6. Eddie Guerrero, Latino Heat. Eddie Guerrero was one of the greatest all-around performers to ever step in the ring. Technical brilliance, high-flying lucha, a fiery presence that could captivate any crowd. In WCW, Eddie had good matches. He won the US title, but he was never pushed as a main event star. Backstage politics and the NWO's dominance kept him boxed in. By 2000, Eddie was frustrated. He left WCW for WWE, and slowly, Latino Heat caught fire. The lowrider entrances, the swagger, the charisma. Fans fell in love. In 2004, Eddie Guerrero stood atop the WWE as world champion, celebrating with his mother and family, tears in his eyes. It was the ultimate underdog triumph. WCW had Eddie for years. They just never believed in him. Chris Benoit, the workhorse. Chris Benoit was never flashy. He wasn't a great talker. He didn't rely on charisma, catchphrases, or gimmicks. What he had was pure wrestling ability, crisp, believable, intense. In the ring, he was surgical. He was real. Benoit's journey to WCW was not easy. He sharpened his craft in Canada, in Japan, and in Mexico, studying multiple styles. By the time he arrived in WCW in the early 90s, he was already known as one of the most technically precise wrestlers in the world. In WCW, Benoit found himself aligned with one of wrestling's most iconic groups, the Four Horsemen. Alongside Ric Flair, Arn Anderson, and others, he became the enforcer of the group. Fans respected him because every match he had looked like a fight, not a performance. His suplexes were sharp, his chops echoed through the arena, and his diving headbutt became his signature. But no matter how good Benoit was, WCW never fully trusted him with the spotlight. He held the TV title. He held the United States Championship. He was a reliable worker, always delivering great matches. But whenever momentum built, it was quickly cooled off. The main event scene was controlled by the same circle of stars: Hogan, Nash, Flair, and Sting. Benoit was never allowed to break through. That changed briefly in January 2000. After years of being overlooked, WCW put the World Heavyweight Championship on Benoit. But it wasn't because they believed in him. It was desperation. A last-ditch effort to keep him from leaving. Benoit knew it. He saw that the company didn't truly value him. The very next day, he made his choice. Benoit vacated the championship, walked out of WCW, and joined his close friends Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn, together known as the Radicals, as they jumped ship to WWE. In WWE, Benoit became exactly what fans had always known him to be: a workhorse, a wrestler's wrestler. He had unforgettable rivalries with Kurt Angle, Chris Jericho, and Triple H. Every match he wrestled felt intense, physical, and real. The peak came at WrestleMania 20. In Madison Square Garden, the biggest stage of them all, Benoit tapped out Triple H in the main event to become World Heavyweight Champion. Tears streamed down his face as confetti rained down. Eddie Guerrero joined him in the ring, holding his own title, and the two best friends embraced. Two men who WCW never believed in, finally standing tall as world champions. WCW had Chris Benoit for years. They had the chance to make him a true main event star, but they never did. WWE gave him the moment of his life: Rey Mysterio, from cruiserweight to world champion. Rey Mysterio was years ahead of his time. His WCW matches redefined what wrestling could be. Springboards, hurricane ranas, fast-paced sequences no one had ever seen before. Fans loved him, but WCW management didn't. They treated him like a sideshow. They kept him locked in the cruiserweight division, and in 1999, they even forced him to unmask. For a luchador, that's sacred. In Mexico, losing the mask is a career-altering event. In WCW, it was a throwaway mid-card angle. After WCW folded, WWE rebuilt Rey's mystique. They protected what made him special. By 2006, Rey Mysterio had won the Royal Rumble. Months later, he became World Heavyweight Champion. All the things WCW said he could never do, he did. Closing WCW's legacy. WCW had The Undertaker. They had Stone Cold Steve Austin. They had Triple H, Mick Foley, Chris Jericho, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, and Rey Mysterio. Legends, icons, main event players. And one by one, they let them slip away. What if WCW had pushed Austin? What if they had believed in Jericho? What if they had never unmasked Rey? We'll never know. But what we do know is this: every superstar WCW failed to see, WWE did. And that made all the difference. Music fades out. End screen with dramatic echo of a crowd chanting, "This is awesome."